Business notice number 2, standing in the name of Justine Davis, to move a motion concerning improving decision-making, integrity, transparency and accountability in our parliament.
I call the member for Johnston.
Madam Speaker, I move that this Assembly recognise the critical importance of improving decision-making, integrity, transparency and accountability in our parliament, and to that end commits to the following measures: re-establishing scrutiny committees that allow for public submissions and thorough review of bills before the parliament, limiting government-to-government questions, Dorothy Dix's, in the chamber to a maximum of 2 out of every 3 parliamentary sitting days, and exploring pathways to enhance public engagement and participation in the legislative process, including through citizens' juries. Madam Speaker, in 2017, the government introduced scrutiny committees based on the recommendations of its own Opening Up Parliament to the People Committee and also the recommendations of the subsequent Standing Orders Committee. At that time, the Chief Minister said scrutiny, accountability and transparency is a crucial feature of a healthy democratic society. It protects against corruption and wrongdoing and produces better decision-making and greater benefits to the community. Scrutiny committees are used in the Queensland Parliament, which, like the NT, is a unicameral chamber. That is, it only has one house. This means that we do not have the checks and balances and the accountability that's brought by having 2 chambers. This need for checks and balances is even more important when we have a parliament where one party has the overwhelming numbers. To ensure good democratic process, we need to ensure that all voices are heard. We saw the value of the scrutiny committees in this parliament firsthand during the 13th Assembly. Their presence significantly enhanced our legislative process, allowing for a thorough examination of government actions and policies. Between 2017 and 2020, the scrutiny committees reported on 81 bills, received 1,179 submissions and recommended changes to 56% of bills. And of the 194 amendments recommended, the Assembly accepted 166, 86% of them. We heard over and over again in this election that people were sick of politicians that did not trust them to act in their interests. We have the opportunity to change that in this chamber. Scrutiny committees are one way to ensure that our leaders are acting in the best interests of the people. They provide a structured forum for examining legislation, for enabling input from all stakeholders, and to consider both the intended and unintended consequences of any laws before this parliament. If we had had the opportunity to refer the 5 bills that we have been asked to vote for on this 2 weeks, I believe we would be making better, stronger, more informed law. I welcome the CLP's announcement that they will re-establish the Legislative Scrutiny Committee from the next sitting of Parliament. As proposed by the opposition on the first day of this Parliament, I would like to see an added member from the crossbench to ensure that it is not dominated by government members and can properly counterbalance the chamber. I did hear the Leader of Government Business advise this would be considered, and I'm looking forward to his response on this. I believe that re-establishing this committee is a clear commitment to a more accountable government, one that values the voices of the people it serves, and I look forward to serving on this committee with fellow members of Parliament and being able to enhance our democratic process and increase trust in government. Mr Deputy Speaker, I also move that this Parliament limit government-to-government question times in this chamber to a maximum of 2 out of every 3 sitting days. This is a crucial step towards ensuring transparency, accountability and the integrity of our parliamentary processes. As you may all know, the term Dorothy Dixer originates from a popular advice columnist who was known for answering questions posed by readers, but questions she had written to herself. In our parliamentary context, a Dorothy Dixer is a question posed by a government backbencher to a government minister, typically designed to showcase the government's policies and achievements rather than to scrutinise them. While it's important for us to celebrate successes, we must also hold ourselves accountable and engage in robust, open dialogue. In 2016, our Legislative Assembly introduced a sessional order aimed specifically at reducing the frequency of these Dorothy Dixers in the interest of fostering a more balanced and democratic discourse. This order clearly prohibited such questions on one day of each sitting week, ensuring that we prioritise genuine scrutiny over self-congratulatory rhetoric. Regrettably, this sessional order was not reintroduced at the beginning of the 14th Assembly or the 15th Assembly in October 24. This absence has created a situation where question time has the potential to devolve into a platform for ministers to promote their achievements rather than engaging in the critical examination that our democratic process demands. By reintroducing this sessional order, we can reaffirm our commitment to good governance. We acknowledge that the role of Parliament is not just to celebrate successes, but to engage in thorough oversight, ask tough questions and address hard truths. The people of the Northern Territory deserve a government that's willing to be held accountable, and limiting Dorothy Dix's is a meaningful way to facilitate that accountability. In addition, this motion would encourage a more dynamic and effective use of our question time. By reserving it primarily for the crossbench and opposition members, we empower those who represent the voices of all of our constituents, those who are often on the front lines witnessing firsthand the impact of our policies and decisions. We need to bring these questions to government and compel it to provide thoughtful and comprehensive responses. And in addition, Mr Deputy Speaker, I ran on a platform of doing politics differently and of bringing community voice into the Parliament. I believe this House should belong to the people, and I believe we need to approach our work of lawmaking for the Northern Territory with the community, the whole community, at its heart. It heartens me to hear the CLP say in this chamber over and over again that they believe in listening to community and doing what the community has told them they want. This is what I believe in too. And I know that to ensure that people's views, all people, are considered and represented, we need good process. Process beyond mainstream media and privately funded campaigns, often representing vested and special interests. We need processes to make sure that there are pathways for people to truly talk about what matters to them and what their ideas are for addressing these concerns. The CLP talk a lot in this chamber about their mandate based on the people that voted for them. To be clear, according to the NTEC, the CLP received approximately 48.9% of the primary vote. Our actual mandate in this House is to represent 100% of the Northern Territory. We need to put whatever processes we can in place to make sure that we are doing that. I urge this chamber to commit to exploring pathways to enhance public engagement and participation in the legislative process. This can include building on existing mechanisms such as Youth Parliament and Have Your Say, and developing new processes which have been used in other governments, both local, state, territory and national, to bring people into Parliament in a meaningful way. This can include processes of deliberative democracy, citizen panels and citizen juries. I recognise these may be new concepts for people in this chamber, and I'm happy to provide links to resources and information on this, including an excellent resource that I have a copy of here if anyone wants, an introduction to deliberative democracy for members of Parliament. In brief, a citizens' assembly or a citizens' jury is a geographically representative cohort to ensure that the voices of the whole community are heard. It brings people together to consider issues of public importance, provides them with information to make decisions, facilitates the process to make recommendations, and then uses those recommendations to inform decision-making. In our own communities, both Darwin and Palmerston councils have used this model to help them develop strategic plans and develop their budgets. Throughout Australia, these models have been used in South Australia for over a decade. In Victoria and New South Wales, there are examples of citizens' assemblies and citizens' juries at the local and state government levels, facilitating effective and inclusive decision-making. Internationally, many parliaments use this model to great effect, including the Scottish Parliament, the Irish Parliament and the German Parliament, and describe it as enhancing their decision-making processes. These examples illustrate the power of bringing citizens into the fold, ensuring that legislative actions are grounded in the voices of those who we serve. One of the things that I love about the Northern Territory is that we have a strong belief in doing things differently. We have the opportunity to make this parliament a beacon of democratic innovation, an example of how to truly connect with our communities, listen to their voices and act upon their needs. In closing, I invite you to join with me in committing to this vision of deliberative democracy and create the structures necessary for meaningful public engagement. Together, I believe we can reshape our legislative processes to reflect the diverse voices of the whole Northern Territory, and I urge every member of this chamber to join me in this endeavour. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Johnson. Member for Nightcliff.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Johnson for bringing this important motion before the Assembly today. So I feel like I've come in here off the street just like any other regular person, and what I've seen so far in this Assembly in question time and debates has been a bit of a shock. In regards to the government questions, or Dorothy Dix's, come on. In what other workplace is it expected that employees ask their bosses questions simply just to blow smoke up the boss's proverbial for no other reasons than just to hear their own voices? It is so painful. You can go and ask a regular person on the street whether they think this is a good use of our time. Spoiler, they don't think so. The people that elected all of us expect us not to waste time and work hard for our high wages that we do get, and we can show them some respect and get rid of Dorothy Dix's. I would wholly support that. A party that stands by their own policies should not be afraid of questions and should not feel the need to fill question time up with fluff from their own members. I am heartened to see the CLP commit to re-establishing the Legislative Scrutiny Committee, which, considering we are a unicameral system with no other house for checks and balances on legislation, is desperately needed. It was disappointing to see, though, that they have effectively stacked it with 3 CLP members to 1 opposition and 1 crossbench. This is not acting in the spirit of real accountability and leaves me feeling despondent about the sincerity of this government in these accountability measures. If there's one thing that unites voters across the political divide, it's their distrust for politicians. This sentiment is not to be ignored or shrugged off. If left to fester, the public's complete lack of trust in politicians and our government is dangerous for democracy. And with the Territory's history of totally opaque decision-making, scandals and negligible accountability, the public have every right to be distrustful. But it doesn't have to be that way. Throughout the election, voters made it abundantly clear to me that they were disillusioned with the lack of integrity in politics. And on a personal level, this total lack of integrity and blatant influence of lobbyists on our politicians was a massive driver for me to put my hand up to stand. I could see the politics here in the NT was not working in the best interests of the people. It came to light earlier in the year that the previous Chief Minister, Natasha Files, my local member, had Gerard Richardson, a gas lobbyist, as a senior political advisor, whilst his lobbying firm was working for a Texan fracking company, and the previous Chief Minister was greenlighting fracking in the Beetaloo at the same time. This was and is unacceptable to myself and to my community, and should be unacceptable to everyone in this chamber. It is one of the main reasons that pushed me to run, and one of the main reasons I chose to run for the NT Greens was because of their refusal to take corporate political donations. This is the integrity that we so desperately need in the NT. We know that both major parties here accept tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars from big business, gas companies, gambling companies, property developers, and they expect us to believe that this does not affect their decision-making. But Territorians are not buying that anymore. As they say, the best disinfectant is sunshine. If members of this Assembly believe that everything that they do and every lobbyist they meet with is above board, then they should have no problem letting the public know about it. So here are the integrity and transparency measures that we need to ensure to have a robust democracy that works in the best interests of everyday Territorians. Politicians in the NT have been tangled up in dodgy donations and lobbyist scandals for decades. This distracts from the work our government should be doing, and also makes you wonder, who is the government really working for? Our community or big corporations? We need to get dirty money out of politics. Both major parties accept substantial donations from corporations, including gambling and gas and major property developers. We need to ban political donations from prohibited industries such as gas and fossil fuel companies, mining and resource companies, property developers, construction companies and real estate agents, the liquor industry, gambling corporations and venues with pokies, and the tobacco industry. 2, we need to highlight what really goes on in Parliament. The NT is the only jurisdiction in Australia without a public lobbyist register, and we have the weakest lobbying regulations in the country. We need enduring structures in place that ensure our politicians work for the people first and not their corporate donors. We need to establish a lobbyist register, demand public diaries for all politicians so we know who is meeting with them, ensure that any government employee in the NT cannot concurrently work for a lobbying firm, reinstate the Policy Scrutiny Committee, which we are doing, and make the rules for alcohol companies attempting to lobby Parliament the same as those for tobacco companies to reduce the alcohol industry interference in health policy. We also need to make what happens here accountable to the community. The Northern Territory Ministerial Code of Conduct, NTMCC, is not strong enough to stop politicians from getting their personal interests mixed up with their main responsibility, which is to do the right thing for the community. The Code of Conduct is unenforceable and leaves too much to individuals' discretion. We need to strengthen the NTMCC to hold our representatives to the federal government standard. Stop the revolving door between Parliament and private sector jobs by enacting a 3-year post-employment prohibition for ministers in industries they have worked with, and impose sanctions of breaches to the NTMCC and lobbying codes of conduct so there's real and enforceable consequences. We need to clean up politics and get corporate influence out of Parliament. This is how we start working to regain the trust of the public. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Okay.
Deputy Speaker, I'll speak briefly to why I won't support this motion. The committee's part, I agree, is good. What I will give the respect to the member for Johnston to explain why, and that is I cannot support a bill that would limit the people of Drysdale, which I represent, in any way in this chamber. So that is why I won't support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Then I'll call on the member for Johnston to close the debate. Oh, sorry, member for Daly, I didn't see you.
No problem. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I just firstly want to thank the member for Johnston for bringing on this motion before the House and this important topic that we're talking about today. Mr Deputy Speaker, when Labor returned to government in 2016, public trust was at an all-time low. Understandably so, given the circumstances and the performance of the Giles CLP government. Recognising the need for change, the former Labor government moved to introduce key reforms. We openly invited more scrutiny on government to restore the community's trust in government and because it was the right thing to do. We established the Independent Commissioner Against Corruption to promote transparency and accountability. This was after the CLP refused to establish the ICAC. We amended the Public Information Act to ensure public funds spent on communications activities were focused on providing the community with essential information and not misuse the bipartisan political promotions. We also got rid of Dorothy Dix's on Wednesday during Parliament sittings. I note the CLP has brought them back, denying the opposition and crossbench valuable opportunities to scrutinise the policies and initiatives of this government. Deputy Speaker, I ask understanding Order 20.
Yep. Cease the interjections.
Thank you. We fully support the member for Johnston's call to return to the previous system under the Labor, where Dorothy Dix's were limited to 2 out of every 3 sittings days. This is an opportunity for the CLP to redeem themselves after they denied opposition members and crossbench members.
Order, order. Can we keep it quiet on this side, please? Continue.
Standing Order 20, the interjections. The CLP have an opportunity to speak on this if they want to.
Member for Daly.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Including brand new members to the House, the opportunity to properly scrutinise the legislation they have rushed through the House throughout the sittings. 1 minute they've made a fuss they've made a fuss about bringing back the Legislative Scrutiny Committee, and the next minute they turned around and said, but we're not actually going to put any of our legislation through it. It's just for show. There is certainly a theme emerging from the CLP government about expecting others to meet standards and they don't think they apply to them.
Sorry, Deputy Chief Minister, can you stop the interjections? Continue, please.
I want to take a moment to put on the record a number of other initiatives that the former Labor government introduced to improve the transparency and accountability of government. In December last year, the Territory Labor government announced a review into the reporting of the Ministerial Conflict of Interest and Declarations Register. Even though there are already a number of legislative controls and procedures in place regarding conflict of interest, it is timely to review current practices, examine their adequacy and make recommendations to strengthen policy, practice and procedures. The then Chief Minister Eva Lawler committed to implementing all 12 recommendations from the review to improve transparency and governance and make more information more readily available for Territorians. It is a question for the current CLP government as to whether they will continue on with this important transparency reform. I take this opportunity to also put on the record that we would very much welcome the establishment of a lobbyist register as suggested by the member for Johnson and the member for Nightcliff too. We fully support you with this. I'll pick up on the interjection by the Deputy Chief Minister. This is a question to you. You're now in government. You do hold the 17 seats out of the 25, so actually you do have the power to do this, Deputy Chief Minister. You do have the control to do this.
Member for Daly, take your seat, please. Take your seat. Point of order. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you. There's no point of order.
What's the point of order?
The point of order is Standing Order 18. When the member is speaking, he should direct his commentary through the chair, not at the Deputy Leader.
Fair enough, but can I ask all members, please, to stop interjecting and let the member for Daly speak? Member for Daly.
Thank you. The CLP said they would introduce one, but let's watch this space. Another area where the former Labor government enhanced transparency was in our detention centres. This was an incredibly important step to ensure the community had confidence that our facilities were free of cruel, inhumane and degrading treatment. We all well know about the incidents of this sort of treatment that were uncovered through the Royal Commission into the protection and detention of children in the NT. So it was absolutely right that we shine a light and allow greater scrutiny on these facilities. In October 2022, the former Labor government passed legislation to allow inspectors full access to places of detention across the NT through the Monitoring of Places of Detention Amendment Bill. The changes also enabled inspections at places such as mental health services. In the Northern Territory, the Ombudsman monitors police watch houses, correctional facilities and court watch houses. The Children's Commissioner is responsible for all places where children under 18 years are detained, and principal community visitors are responsible for mental health and forensic disability facilities. The amendments gave agencies with the power to investigate allegations of torture to have unrestricted access without needing to notify before their arrival. We continue to support full and open access to these facilities by independent inspectors. It is incredibly important that we are treating those Territorians in detention, particularly vulnerable children, with appropriate care and respect. We absolutely expect the CLP to maintain this standard given the range of punitive laws they have just introduced this sittings. Again, I'd like to thank the member for Johnson for bringing on this important motion. The Labor opposition is very supportive of your efforts to improve the transparency and accountability in our parliament through the measures you have proposed. So thank you, member for Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Any other speakers? Member for Gwajja.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I do
Deputy Speaker.
rise, Mr Deputy Speaker. I do take the opportunity to rise tonight to speak to the motion. It is an important motion. I thank the member for Johnson for bringing the motion to the Assembly because it provides us with an opportunity to look at what's being proposed and where the future direction should be. And I thank the member for Johnson for it. As the Deputy Leader of the Opposition has said, we'll certainly be supporting this motion. We'll certainly support the Registrar for lobbyists. It's an important step in the right direction. But what we have heard is we've heard from the government that they do want to do things differently. Well, tonight is an opportunity to actually show that you are going to do things differently. You've been critical of Labor and you've been critical of what has happened in the last Assembly, and you've acknowledged the work that was done in the first Assembly in 2016 of the Labor government. Critical, but you're not wanting to change. You actually have the opportunity tonight to amend the motion, to put in additional provisions, to talk about things. You've got the opportunity to do that, but instead, the member for Nelson, the member for Brennan, the member for Catherine, they all come in here and they laugh. They've all been chuckling in here. This is the Parliament's day. This is General Business Day, member for Nelson. I know you haven't been here long enough to understand how the Parliament works, but let's be absolutely clear. Today is a parliamentary day. It's General Business Day. The member for... I pick up on the interjections from the member for Nelson, the Deputy Chief Minister, making fun at this motion. But the member for Johnson is representing her constituency, the good people of Johnson and the good people of the Northern Territory, who have an opportunity tonight to have an added layer of accountability, of oversight and restoring integrity in this Parliament. Now, the CLP keep talking about we're going to do things differently, we're going to be more transparent, more open, more accountable. Then why are you hiding from supporting this motion tonight and allowing these changes to come in? We have only heard from one member of the government that is a backbencher, and he spoke for under 3 minutes. And it's absolutely hilarious. It is hilarious that the Education Minister throws those interjections. The member for Catherine, this is your day. No, this is Parliament's day. The people of Johnson, of Nightcliff, of Gwodja, of Arafura, of Arnhem, of Daly, of Mulka should not be seen any less equal because we are not in government. This is every constituent's day to actually have a motion debated in this Parliament about transparency, about accountability, about making sure that Parliament makes good decisions. Because you brought in 5 bills in the last 2 weeks that haven't had any scrutiny, haven't had any oversight, haven't had any consultation. And then we find out they're actually not that urgent because they don't even start until January. Could have been to a scrutiny committee, could have had a public hearing, could have actually spoken about it, because the bail bill, the CLP lied to Territorians because it doesn't start until January. But it was so urgent it had to be done. No, you could have actually debated it here. You pat yourselves on the back and say, we're great, we're doing things differently. You're actually not, because you talk about bringing in a scrutiny committee, but then what you do with the scrutiny committee? You dominate it with your own government members. 3 government members, 1 opposition, 1 crossbench. That's exactly what you've been...
Can we hear the member for Gwodja?
That's what you've been saying you didn't want to do. Did I say that we were perfect? Absolutely not. Was there room for improvement? Absolutely. But you're doing exactly what you've been critical of us for when we were in government and you were opposition. Actually, it's worse, because the treatment that you are giving towards the independent members of this Parliament is atrocious. Brand new members of this Parliament, and you're laughing at their motions tonight around transparency, accountability and being open. And there we go. The Treasurer, your comments. Childish attitudes. You're supposed to be representing the Minister of the Crown, and you're in here laughing about accountability, transparency. It's absolutely flabbergasting. And again, one member, the member for Drysdale, the only one who actually had the courage to speak to this motion. Now, he doesn't support it, but at least he's got the guts to say he doesn't support it. You know? Might have been 20 seconds worth, but it was something. This is an opportunity for everyone to actually come together and to talk about it, and to acknowledge that everyone in this parliament needs to do better when it comes to transparency, open and accountability. Not saying that there doesn't, but we all should be working together to rectify the provisions that need to be tightened. But the fact that there is not a single contribution from any one of the ministers, the fact that there is interjection saying this is your day so we're not going to speak, is actually quite alarming, because this isn't our day, this is a parliamentary day where we put forward ideas. If you had issues with the motion that was presented by the member for Johnson, or the contributions by the member for Nightcliff, or the contribution by the member for Daly, then you could move an amendment and add something in that you think would be better, or ask that something be removed. But the fact that you are so arrogant that you don't even feel like it's appropriate to contribute to this motion is alarming. And it is, again, a message to Territorians that your commitments and your actual actions speak for themselves, because you talk the big talk, but you can't walk that walk. It is absolutely just alarming that that is the position that we are talking about today. A scrutiny committee that is dominated by the government, that will have a government chair, again, criticised the former government for doing all of this, but you're doing the exact same thing. The fact that you could have allowed our two brand new members of the crossbench an opportunity to look at the bills, to talk to people about the bills, but no, you rushed it through on urgency, and then it only became apparent because the member for Johnson asked the Corrections Minister, who was clearly struggling at the time and didn't know what he was saying, let the cat out of the bag, that the legislation doesn't even start until January, so it's not that urgent. Because if it was, you would have taken it over to the administrator and you would have had it gazetted and you would have had it commencing. That's where we are right now. So it's not very open, it's not very transparent, it's not very accountable. And the fact that no one is willing to actually talk tonight to that actually speaks a huge volume. One member, the member for Drysdale, is the only person from the government who has spoken on this. There are a whole range of things in the motion. The motion is a big motion, I'll admit that, and I'll admit that you have attempted to look like you're doing something by establishing your scrutiny committee, but again, it's everything that you criticise the government on. It's everything that you said that you wouldn't do, that you're doing. And I'm not actually holding the new members of the government in the same light as I am as the cabinet ministers, or the majority of the cabinet ministers who were on this side in opposition, who were kicking and screaming about the unfair treatment that they felt they were getting at the time, but they've just adopted everything in that. The citizens' jury, a great idea to engage people more in the parliament. The register, yep, really important. They're all great ideas, and we should have more time to talk about them and to understand those meanings. I think we're also hearing from a government that your consultation was done by your candidates in an election. That's not consultation. That's people talking and promising the world.
Please.
So it is great disappointment tonight that we can't come together on this important motion. I think, Member for Johnson, I certainly think that this should not be the end of the process and the commitment to try and bring these motions in around transparency and accountability, because I think it allows each and every one of us to have those important conversations around reforming things, because people make mistakes, no denying that, and when you have conversations you're able to kind of talk about how you can enhance existing measures or how you can bring in new measures. And I think that that's the important part that we should all be talking about. So I really want to say, Member for Johnson, thank you for bringing the motion. Member for Nightcliff, you raised some very important points, as does the member for Daly. I don't think that what's being proposed by the member for Johnson erodes or prevents or stops the voice of any local community. In fact, it enhances those voices. It enables people to have those conversations, because let's be clear as well, if you don't live in the top end, your constituency is often so far removed from the halls of power that they feel voiceless and powerless. And these are opportunities through what's being proposed around engaging with our citizens so that they are more democratically involved, because the groups can go out and meet people in communities, have those public hearings, do that important work. It's really important. I think the member for Daly spoke about the previous government in 2016 to 2020, and that work that was undertaken on those scrutiny committees, it was good. Room for improvement. They disappeared. Acknowledge that. Should have they disappeared? No. Should they come back? Yes. I think, well, Member for Catherine, I pick up on your interjection. What we're doing about it, well, we're talking about it right now, and I'd really like to hear your contribution on this, because you've done exactly what you were critical of the former government of doing, which seems to be
Order, stop the chatter.
A rotational thing. But again, crickets from the member for Catherine when we talk about transparency and accountability. What we are here to do is to have those conversations, and they are important. And I think that moving forward, when we do discuss bills, are we going to see a similar position where the CLP decide that a controversial bill shouldn't go to a scrutiny committee and they will just bring it in on urgency and remove the entire scrutiny process? Because that's potentially what we'll see, and that is something that we don't want to see. There's heaps of work to be done, and I think that that's all should be framed around improving Parliament to the people. And there was that work that was done in 2016. I think the member for Araluen, with the former member for Fong Lim and other members of the Legislative Assembly, travelled to Queensland, where there is the same system. It's a unicameral Parliament. There is no upper house. The upper house that was there was abolished a number of years ago, and they have a similar process to us with estimates, and they have those scrutiny committees. And I remember that work was incredibly important. I remember the members talking about their trip and how that could be done in a social and economic lens, or legislation that is targeting a cohort or a particular issue would be able to be discussed, and that they would consider the possible pathways, and then they'd have public hearings not just in the main capital city, but they had hearings right across the jurisdiction. I think that's really important because for people living in East Arnhem Land, people living in the southwest region, in my electorate of Gwodja, often they don't get the opportunity to participate in those hearings because they have the inability to get there because of the barriers of transport or financial assistance. So it is something that we all should do. I'm actually very supportive, and I pushed parliamentary colleagues last time when I was in government. I pushed my colleagues, and I know that the member for Arnhem did as well, to have the regional sittings. So we used to, many years ago under Claire Martin, we used to sit in Alice Springs. We used to take Parliament down there. And that was so that people in Central Australia and Barkly got access to see Parliament in operation. School groups got to go through and see, but everyday people got to go in there and see how question time worked, got to see how legislation is interrogated, is debated, consideration in detail. It was a really good process. I do acknowledge, though, that there were a number of issues around security, and more than it was the Hansard costs of all of the infrastructure going down to be able to accurately record it. But that's another measure that the government could consider, is the re-establishment of the regional parliamentary sittings. It doesn't have to be every year, but it could be once in the term. Parliament goes down to Central Australia, and that people have the opportunity to have access to the democratic process through regional sittings. I think that's an important step. That's something that I would have liked to have seen when we were in government. I pick up on the interjections. Clearly the member for Nelson does not like Central Australia because he's interjecting about it. But, you know, it's a good opportunity. I think it's certainly something that we could...
Deputy Chief Minister, Leader of the Opposition, can you both cease? Continue, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. But again, there's some of the options that I think we could be discussing tonight. That's some of the debate that could be being proposed by the government if they didn't want to support what the member for Johnson has put up, but we haven't heard anything from them. So we're unable to get an understanding of why they won't support this very important motion. So members, I really encourage you to support this motion. I thank the member for Johnson for bringing it forward, and we absolutely look forward to supporting it. Thank you.
Member for Barkly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And, firstly, I'd like to thank the member for Johnson for providing an opportunity to address the critical importance of improving decision-making, integrity, transparency and accountability in our parliament. The suggestion from the member for Johnston early last week claiming there is no mechanism to scrutinise bills before Parliament is it's just absurd, as the terms of reference for Sessional Order 14 in our new sessional orders for the 15th Assembly just refer to Sessional Order 14, which clearly defines the functions of the Scrutiny Committee, including inquiring into and reporting on any bill referred to it by the Assembly. Madam Speaker, as the Leader of Government Business, I presented the sessional orders to the Assembly last Tuesday, 15th of October 2024. These sessional orders established a Legislative Scrutiny Committee made up of government, opposition and crossbench members. In fact, the member for Johnston is a member of the Scrutiny Committee. We also have the member for Wanguri, the member for Drysdale, the member for Goyder, and we just heard from the member for Gwodja. He's actually on the Scrutiny Committee as well. So the committee was adopted, I know, before Ms Davis, before the member for Johnson tabled this motion after we had already moved standing and sessional orders. The Scrutiny Committee provides opportunity for the scrutiny of legislation and reporting to the Assembly in advance of second reading debates, with some consequential amendment to the process of the passage of a bill to allow for this additional scrutiny where conducted. Now, let's not forget that the former Labor government abandoned this committee. That's right. Yes, under the former Labor government in the 14th Assembly, there was no scrutiny. And, Madam Speaker, some people here in the Assembly, if you haven't seen it, it's called Restoring Integrity to Government. This particular document, Madam Speaker, was tabled in this House on the 30th of November 2016 by the previous Labor government. So have a look at that when you get a chance, members, because they certainly didn't restore any integrity to the government at all. And they should be ashamed of themselves. Simple. Should be ashamed of themselves. So the interesting thing is that the member for Gwaja is now on the record admitting that they did make mistakes when in government. So the member for Gwaja has admitted they made mistakes when in government. So I wonder if he considers abandoning certain elements of parliamentary process, such as the Scrutiny Committee, was one of the Labor's mistakes. Because it was Labor that got rid of the Scrutiny Committee, Madam Speaker. There was a Scrutiny Committee between 2016 and 2020, but the Labor government coming into power in 2020 scrapped the Scrutiny Committee to ensure that there was no scrutiny of legislation coming into this House. In relation to limiting government questions in the chamber to a maximum of 2 out of every 3 parliament sitting days, the standing orders as they stand place no restrictions on who may ask questions, and long-standing practice is that any private member may ask a question. Crossbench members receive the call in proportion to their numbers in this House. There is nothing in the standing orders that prevents Dorothy Dixer-style questions. In fact, parliaments all over the country operate in the same way. All members should maintain the right to raise issues. Each member in this parliament was elected by their electorate. They should all have an opportunity to contribute in question time, in debate, in this House. To try and restrict that is unparliamentary. In fact, it could likely restrict the notional ability of any member to take part in the proceedings of this House. So restricting members' participation, that's not what we're all about. We encourage participation by all members in this House. And I want to make sure that every member in this House gets an opportunity to represent their electorate, contribute to debate, ask questions and raise issues. In fact, the House, Madam Speaker, the House belongs to the people. The people of the territory vote, and members elected reflect the views of Territorians. Every member elected here was elected by Territorians. That's why they're here representing their electorates. So in any way to try and restrict that is clearly wrong. The member for Johnson is keen to explore pathways to enhance public engagement and participation in the legislation process, including citizens' juries. And it was interesting to hear the member for Gwaja because he said it's a great idea. So again, pick up this document because this is what Labor was talking about in 2016, citizens' juries. The member for Gwaja said it's a great idea, but they had 8 years to do it. And they didn't. 8 years they had to deliver citizens' juries. Even the member for Gwaja said it was a great idea. He was sitting in this parliament for 8 years. Not once did he raise it in this parliament apart from today. Not once. Not once. So the committees, Madam Speaker, provide the public an opportunity to get involved in the work of the Assembly by making submissions and speaking at hearings and public forums. Parliamentary committees provide a forum for all parliamentarians to play a role in the legislative process. As a member for Johnson, it is incumbent upon the member to seek out, consult and represent the voices of her constituents. That's her role. That's the role of every member in this parliament, to get out and consult and speak to their constituents. It is the member for Johnston's job to reflect the views of her constituents. It's also my job. It's the job of everybody in this parliament to reflect the views of their constituents. That's why we've been elected, and that's why we're sitting here today, to reflect the views of our constituents. It's not about having citizens' juries. It's not about going out and setting up other processes. My advice to any member here is get out, talk to your constituents, look, listen and learn about what's going on in your area and represent those views here in the parliament. Through the committee process, the member for Johnson will be afforded a forum for experts and members of the community to share their views on a proposed policy or law, investigate gaps or shortcomings in existing laws and policies and raise matters critical to the lives and rights of Australians. In addition, the government has expanded the opportunity for additional discussion in petitions. We've doubled the length of time when a petition can be debated. Under Labor, in the 14th Assembly, a petition provided for only 16 minutes of discussion. In this parliament, a petition can be discussed for up to 32 minutes, and more members will have an opportunity to contribute. The mover will also have more opportunity to speak to the issues contained in the petition, once again having the opportunity to discuss and represent the views of their constituents. The sessional orders presented to the Assembly last week provide the community additional opportunity to bring its views to the Parliament through its members. All members hold that responsibility, both through government or general business, debate on matters of public importance, petitions, in adjournment or any other form of debate that allows for members to contribute. So to this end, there is no need for citizens' juries. Even though the member for Gwaja thinks it's a great idea, again, the question is, he had 8 years to bring in a citizens' jury. It was in this document. In this document. In this document, and of course the member for Gwaja, here he is trying to say that he likes the idea but failed to do anything over the last 8 years. The sessional orders of the 15th Assembly, unlike the 14th Assembly under the former Labor government, enable a vast improvement in mechanisms for improving decision-making, integrity and accountability.
Could you take your seat, please? What's your point of order, Member for Johnston?
Standing Order 44, I move that the motion be put.
No, I haven't finished.
Do members support that the motion be put? Are those in favour of saying the noes have it? Continue, Member for Berkeley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, looking at the motion that's been presented to this House about re-establishing scrutiny committees that allow for public submissions through review of bills for Parliament, we have scrutiny committees. If we look at the limiting government to government questions, Dorothy Dix is in the chamber to a maximum of 2 out of every 3 in Parliament sitting days. Again, I've spoken about that, Madam Speaker. Limiting Dorothy Dix's is limiting the opportunity for every member in this House to participate in the parliamentary process. Every member elected here was elected by their electorate to be able to ask questions and participate. So to try and limit Dorothy Dix's is limiting the ability of elected members in this House to represent their constituents. In regard to the third part of this motion, as I've said, Madam Speaker, citizens' juries was originally placed into the Restoring Integrity document. It was never followed, it was never pursued by the Labor government. Citizens' juries is just another layer of consultation. It can't replace what's needed by every local member, and that's to get out and talk to the people that they were elected in their electorate. So when we look at and when I hear,
Member for
the
Berkeley,
member,
the time's expired for general business. Would you like to just conclude what you're saying? And
sorry, the time's up now,
it's
is it?
7 o'clock. Yes.
I'll leave it at that.
So that's the end of general business. We will move on.
Point of clarification, has the member for Berkeley concluded his remarks, or is he wishing to continue those? Just point of clarification.
General business has concluded, which means he can no longer speak.
Yes, but I was just seeking clarification, Madam Speaker, that if he wasn't wishing to speak, the time being 7, that the question could be put.
The time for that has expired, Member for Guadra. I see where you're going, but I think general business has come to a conclusion at 7, now after 7 p.m. So we'll go on to papers. Are there any papers to be tabled this evening? Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is that the Assembly adjourn. Are there any speakers?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Member for Nightcliff.
Oh, no, I'll let you go first. Oh. Can you go first? Sorry, can I give it to her first? I didn't really...
Member for Johnston.
Madam Speaker, like 11 other people in this chamber, I'm brand new in here. And like all the other new members, I've come into this role because I want to make things better in the Northern Territory, better in our parliament, and I want us to make good laws. I know we all do. As I just said, like every member in this chamber, that's why I'm here. I've heard the CLP say that they're committed to integrity and transparency, and I welcome that. I welcome the Scrutiny Committee. I welcome the extension of time for petitions. I'm extremely disappointed that the CLP does not want to support what I've put on the table in terms of moving towards more integrity and accountability. I have heard the member for Berkeley explain to me what my role is in terms of listening to and talking to my electorate and my community. I understand that role very well, member for Berkeley. I understand that's what I am elected to do, and that's what I intend to do. I was elected on a campaign of bringing integrity and accountability and scrutiny to Parliament because people felt like that was not what was happening in this building. My community asked me to try and do this, and I have been trying to do it from day one in this chamber. I don't want to go back to my community and tell them that our government does not support this. I don't want to go back there and tell them that this government does not support any extra mechanisms that can bring integrity, accountability and transparency to our political processes. Beg your pardon?
Can you... Let's stop interjecting and direct your comments through the chair, please. Thank you. Member for Johnston, please continue.
I'm standing before this chamber with disappointment and with and also with hope. With hope that I've heard the from my fellow new members when we've had time to spend together, and from the returning members, that there is a commitment to doing things better and doing things differently. That's certainly my intention, and I look forward with some disappointment right now to doing that into the future. I was going to spend I know I've got a bit more time, and what I did want to speak about tonight in my adjournment speech was a shout out to some of the people and the members of my community, which the member for Berkeley has talked about. I've certainly hit the ground running in terms of the being elected, but the campaign that I ran was very engaged with the community, and I've done as much as I can to continue that engagement since I've been elected. My community of Allawa, Moyle, Jingalee and Milner is a very engaged community. They have come to my electorate office, even though it's somewhere which is not an accessible place since I've been elected, to meet with me, to talk with me, to tell me the things that they want to make sure I do for them in this parliament. There are people in our community who are absolutely worth celebrating, and there are so many of them. Just to name a couple, to young people in the community who recently have had amazing successes in the arts field. So Omar Gage, who lives in Jingalee and went all the way to Edinburgh to compete in the Edinburgh Comedy Festival. Chella, who I've just forgotten her last name, bear with me for a minute, it'll come, who lives in Alloa. Chella Williams, my apologies. Who's just won an amazing award, incredible writer and playwright and artist. There are many, many people in our community, young people who are doing incredible things who I want to celebrate. And I also want to give a very special shout out throughout my whole campaign. And since I've won, I was fuelled daily by the Greek Men's Club at Milner Shops, who sit and have coffee every morning. A group of old retired men, many of whom, I think I might be the first woman who's ever gone in there and sat down with them. They became my strongest supporters, and they watched me in Parliament. They make great coffee, if anyone wants a Greek coffee or a frappe, and particularly to Stan, who is my coffee maker, I want to give him a big shout out and a thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.